Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Hello, hello, hello. It's Andy Nolch here, the Space Cowboy, and I'm ready to rip it up with you for another Indie Scientology podcast. Today's podcast is a briefing about some of Hubbard's early fiction. I've listened to these pieces because they are audiobooks, but they're like dramatized audiobooks, so they read out the story and they make noises about the story. So it's like listening to a movie, sort of. I actually really like it because I'm not that into reading, and I don't like... I just find reading can be very boring, and it's much better me listening to this than actually sitting down and reading the Hubbard books. So anyway, let's get into this. Oh, before that, maybe I'll just mention COVID because it's such a big event. Melbourne's just come out of its third lockdown. We had a snap lockdown, which is a 5-day lockdown, just a quick, hardcore, boom, 5-day lockdown. Which I noticed, I think New Zealand might have been the first place to do that, and they did it in 6 months ago or something, and it was the first time I heard of it. But it was like a snap lockdown when they just get a few little cases, and they just... New Zealand might have even got only one case, and they were just like, boom, lockdown for 5 days. So this is the first time Melbourne's had that, and so it was our third lockdown, and luckily we came out of it because we've had some really big ones. And it's just so obvious COVID's completely fake. It's almost like a test of intelligence to see if you believe it. It's interesting how all the lefty communist cities, they tend to have these problems with COVID. Oh, COVID just seems to be gravitating towards lefty cities and they're having problems with it, whereas other places like Kansas City or Calcutta or these other places, they're not having to do these lockdowns and stuff. And there isn't all these people dying and stuff. So, COVID must be picking on lefty places and trying to destroy them. No, it's just ridiculous and it's completely fake, the whole thing. It's because communists are in control in these cities like New York and London and Melbourne, and they can get away because they've got the control system, they've got the judges in their back pocket, and they've got the police that are basically communist police. They enforce lefty ideas and stuff. They're busy running around looking for people bullying gay people, and there can be heaps of fraud going on and people having money stolen, and the police won't bother looking into that. They're busy looking for who's picking on gays, and it's just like, it's so stupid, but it's just a communist agenda that they are forwarding. Anyway, so it looks like from now on the snap lockdown is a technique that they're going to use, and it does seem to have quite an effect on businesses, because that seems to be the whole point of COVID, to just destroy all small businesses, so then they're forced to get government-backed loans, and then when they've got the government-backed loans to survive, they then have to follow the rules of the government, because Hubbard goes into this actually in Mission Earth, the fiction book. A way of controlling someone is by controlling them with debt. It's what the bankers use as a tactic. They don't have to own all the companies in the world. They just have to have those companies owe their money, and then they own them, and you have to do what they say. It's actually spoken about in RJ67 when he says all the countries on earth are getting bankrupted by the bankers, so that then they can control them. And that's why we've got all these governments that are just up to their eyeballs in debt and spending money on these ridiculous programs that are just a waste of money. Because the bankers have got their guys in as politicians, and they are executing their plans, and they've got planet Earth pretty well under control, and that's how they've been able to execute this COVID program, because if they were trying to execute COVID 50 years ago, and if they were trying to execute COVID when all these countries weren't in debt to them, then they just wouldn't be able to do it. It just wouldn't occur. Maybe one city, one country could be affected, but anyway, they got their whole control system, their little octopus with their hands and arms everywhere, and it's very strong in Melbourne. And so we are. It looks like in the future, it looks like in the future they are going to do more lockdowns, and COVID isn't over, which is really sad. Because we're a year into COVID now, and it's like they're not phasing this away. They're not fading it out. It's like COVID's not going to go away. It's going to be like what terrorism was after 9/11, where it was hanging around for years and years. So it looks like that's what it's going to be, and they literally, I like to watch mainstream media to see what the future is going to be, because they say it on it. And they're building COVID quarantine camps, like, so if you're building camps, because they've been using hotel quarantine for travellers and stuff, quarantining in hotels, which makes sense, because if COVID was just a short-term little stunt, you don't need to build permanent centres. But if they're building permanent centres, it's like, oh my God. I mean, they're telling us it's going to last for years, and then they're now going to start building centres for travellers to quarantine at. And so that's going to take like at least 6 months, and then it's just, COVID has turned out to be the worst case scenario, is basically what I'm saying. But I'm getting off topic. I think everyone should be positive, and I'm positive, and so far things are pretty cool for me and actually exciting, because it's like, whoa, we are full on in a sci-fi movie. Now, back to Hubbard's fiction. Not that much of this fiction is sci-fi. In fact, I think none of it is. The Hubbard got into sci-fi actually more later on in his career. But what I've got here is the Hell Job series, which is a bunch of little short stories about working different jobs. One of them might be working as a rigger on a building or something shit. I don't even know what that is, but one might be like working on a horse ranch, and one might be doing little odd things. They're nicely recorded, and they're sort of interesting stories. One of them's like a deep sea diver. I like that one, the sound of it. The Scientology, because these are made by the Church of Scientology, they're very good with their production values and their quality of sound. And this one's quite nice, the dramatizations and stuff. But they're not really worth listening to. There's almost nothing in here that's like essential. But if you're just bored, like I definitely wouldn't buy this Hell Job series. Now, the next one is this here, which is, let me just see, hope they don't fall. This one here is Typewriter in the Sky. Now, I was Typewriter in the Sky. I was excited about these three here on your right, on my left, because I was like, whoa, because I'd listened to Mission Earth and Battlefield Earth, and they are fucking awesome. I mean, they are such good fiction. I really recommend them. They're epic, huge reading to get through, but they are worth it. So I was kind of looking forward to Hubbard's earlier fiction. Now, I got to be honest, I was totally let down with Hubbard's earlier fiction. I mean, it was pretty shit, to be honest. The only one I reckon was good was this Fear. This was the only one out of all these, because this Hell Job series has a bunch of maybe at least 10 different stories in it. So this is a bunch of stories. And only one of them's worth listening to. And Final Blackout and this Typewriter in the Sky, they get good reviews, but maybe they were good back in their time, but I didn't find it interesting at all, and I didn't even finish them. I listened to the first, they're about 5 CDs each, and I listened just to the first 25%, and I just said stuff it and just gave up, like, because it was just boring. It wasn't that interesting. Like here, Typewriter in the Sky, some dude goes in, becomes a part of the storyline of some guy, and he goes back to like the 1700s, and it's like Spanish sailors, and it's just boring. It's legitimately, there's nothing to it. The next one here, which is Final Blackout. This one might have been good. I could see how it might have been good in 1940 because it was talking about the future and biological weapons, and it might have been like, back then it would have been sci-fi actually. This would be considered sci-fi, and they would have been like, whoa, biological weapons, and oh my God, a world war, and well, like they might have found it interesting back then, but now it's like, whatever, like it's genuinely boring, and it's just about soldiers and stuff, like there's just nothing to it. Now, fear, like at least the Hell Job stories, which were not that much, you could still sort of get entertained, but these two here ones, I didn't even get anything from them. I wouldn't even bother watching them, listening to them. Now this fear one, this one was actually kind of entertaining. It still wasn't anything compared to Mission Earth and Battlefield Earth. Like I really like them. And Mission Earth I just put up as just like, whoa, that's Hubbard's masterpiece of fiction. I mean, it is incredible how good that book is. I have so much respect for Hubbard because of Mission Earth. Like it is. Well, I'm into comedy, but it's just like, it's genuinely funny and it's just interesting, and it's got so much data in it about life. This fiction stuff, this early fiction stuff, Hubbard was only like around 30 years old when he wrote them, and he didn't quite know as much about life, so he didn't have all this data about life, which is so interesting that I like to have in science fiction movies and stories. That's what I like about them. I'm not really listening to them to be entertained. I want to get data about life because I love data and information, and that's what this whole briefings are about. They're intelligence briefings about what's going on in the world. Like that's why I could never get into like playing tennis much or something like that, because it's just like, how's that information? It's just playing tennis. Like I don't like silly waste of time sort of things. So these things are sort of silly and wasting time. But this thing, fear, this is interesting because it talks about demons and it actually relates to some spiritual and religious stuff, and it gives you a bit of an insight into what Hubbard knew about, because it does have some occasional bits of philosophy in it. And it is a little bit of a funky story, like where a guy... It starts off with a guy that's like a skeptic and is maybe working at a university or something, and he's like, demons don't exist and blah, 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 and he's very skeptical, and then something happened where demons start affecting his life, and he goes into like some bizarre warped experience, kind of like a Philip K. Dick type thingo, where you don't know if it's real or a dream or not, and the demons mess with him. And then he wakes up and realizes he was dreaming or something like that. And so it's kind of interesting, and you can see how it has a quote here saying, "Without fear, I would never have come up with what I do." And it's by Philip K. Dick. He said that. And I understand what Philip K. Dick is talking about, because I could see how this trippy story, Fear, sort of inspired Philip K. Dick's fiction, which I think is better than Hubbard's fiction, besides Mission Earth. But Philip K. Dick is really awesome. And I can see how Philip K. Dick was inspired by this. This was like a little hint of that trippiness that Philip K. Dick stories have. Like the Total Recall movie, how that was based on Philip K. Dick. I mean, that story is so like, what the hell? It's so like, whoa, what's going on here? This has a little bit of that element, so you can tell it's the beginning of it, but it's nowhere near as cool as Total Recall. Anyway, the demon stuff is interesting because the high levels in Scientology deal in sort of demons and sort of entities and stuff like that. And so you understand that Hubbard sort of knew about this sort of stuff and was interested in it. In this story, he mentions the Kabbalah. And Hubbard mentions that in an OT8 document, the Kabbalah. So it makes you go, yeah, this is interesting and stuff. And it's probably the only one worth listening to, but it still isn't even that good. But it gives you an idea into somebody who is being affected by demons and how they mess with their mind. And I think Hubbard was that kind of person. I think that some people have like a psychic ability and they can tap into other dimensions, and demons and stuff and entities can mess with them and stuff them up. And that's why I think actually possibly the high levels in Scientology are so obsessed with demons and entities and stuff, because Hubbard was so obsessed with them. Now, I think that probably not that. Not everyone is affected by these sorts of things, but Hubbard seemed to have been the person who was, and I need to find out more about it. But it showed it is possible that Hubbard's life he showed signs of mental illness, like he wasn't quite right, and so he could be one of these people who was affected by entities and demons and stuff. Because those people who are in like psych wards and shit and that are hearing voices, they get affected by these sorts of things. And when you listen to this story like Fear, you get an idea of what it'll be like to be in the universe of one of these nutter people who have this problem. And Hubbard sort of recreates it, and because he does a good job of recreating it, it always makes you think like, Hubbard might be suffering from this a little bit. Like that's how good a job he did. It's like if someone writes a story about being a loser football player and it's a really good story and it's really accurate, it's like, maybe that person has had an experience in their life of being a loser football player, and that's how they wrote such a good book. Anyway, it could be a bit like that with this Fear story. So it's quite interesting. So that's why it's like, I think that possibly Hubbard was trying to control people and profit and stuff from the OT levels, but at the same time it doesn't mean that they're not real and that he doesn't believe in entities and stuff. It's just that he might have worked out a way to gain advantage from it and stuff. But also, I mean, it's the same as like Dianetics. Like I fully don't agree with Dianetics, but that doesn't mean I don't think that somebody hasn't been traumatized as a kid and that affects them as an adult. But I sort of disagree with the way Hubbard like promotes Dianetics and talks about it, and he takes like a bit of truth and then blows it up into a certain thing. So it seems like with the OT levels, it's like he took a certain truth about entities and demons and blew it up into this whole thing and then benefited from it. And I think that, anyway, it's all wild, but that's it. That's all I really have to say about this fiction. I thought this was going to be a short briefing, and there's not much more I need to say. I mean, I think the only one worth listening to is this Fear one, and it wasn't even that good, really. So yeah, I guess I might as well wrap up. But if it comes to Hubbard's fiction, I really do like his later stuff. It's just got more information about life and deep philosophy and information about how the world really works, like how judges decide the result of a court case before they've even seen the result of a court case, because it's just decided in backroom deals and stuff like that. And how like a police chief wants to get in the news so he gets a good job and then gets a good promotion, and just the inside baseball of how the world actually works, that is all over Mission Earth. And that's why it's such a great book, and it's really, really funny. But it's a huge epic story to get through, and I had to listen to it like 4 times. I mean, it's so epic, and it's got like twists in it and stuff, and there's just all this stuff in it. You can't just listen to it once, because the first time you listen to it, you're just like, what the hell is going on? You need to know the story before you even listen to it the first time in order to try and follow along with it, because it's such an epic story. But yeah, so I'm wrapping up with, because I'm sort of no longer a Scientologist now, because I found out more things about it and how Dianetics wasn't quite right and Hubbard like exaggerated things and stuff. So I'm moving out of being a Scientologist. So I'm probably only going to do like 2 more briefings or something, and I want to do 1 interview with John Attack, like the Scientology historian, and that's about it. And I'm going to move out of the Indie Scientology podcast and move into doing just knowledge reports in general about things in the world, because I know, I'm no longer really a full-fledged Scientologist. Anyway, I mean, if Hubbard wasn't an alcoholic, I mean, that's just like, what the hell? It's just like the tech just doesn't... it doesn't really work. And I think a lot of the time people are just sitting there imagining shit. And their head's so far up their ass, and they're so like brainwashed and so like, oh yeah, I'm thinking this is happening and stuff, that they think they go clear and stuff like that and other things. And it's literally in their imagination, because humans had this ability. So anyway, it's another topic, but I just wanted to mention these thingos. Maybe check out this fear one. You'll have to buy it from Bridge Publications. The other ones I wouldn't even bother. Because Mission Earth was so good, I expected more out of these. I thought the earlier thingos... See, someone will be listening to this and they're thinking, oh, Andy's not really a Scientologist, so he's ripping on Hubbard's early fiction. It's like, no, even if I was still a Scientologist, I would still not think good of these early fiction things. They're sort of boring, and they're just like these silly little tales and stuff. Like, they're not that interesting. And yeah. Anyway, I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible. See you later.